子啊，然后我们吃那个，然后他们当时不是因为疫情都。
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello. Oh, you can hear me.
Yes, we
No,
can hear
yeah, I
you.
can hear. Hello. Hello.
Hi, yes, we can hear you.
All right. Okay. All right. Hello, Ko. David, are you there, David?
Yes, Doc, I can hear you. I can hear you. Everything is fine.
Everything is fine, huh?
Yeah.
Hello.
有人在鱼塘下面上马，终于是制服了这条大鱼。
哎，我看看你。晚上讲话会听到。
我要讲了，
我说会听到的。
我开始讲了，不要跟我讲话了。Hello, are we okay now?
Yeah, I'm fine. Over here, Mr. Cook. Yeah,
Everything is okay?
yeah. My side is I'm available. Whenever you want to start, I'm already on board.
David, are we okay? Ready?
Yes, everything is ready and we can start on time. And are also starting our live streaming on the YouTube channel now. Thank you for coming.
Speakers, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning to everyone, depending where you are, and welcome to the inaugural East-West lecture by Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. I'm Koh King Kee, founder and president of East-West Bridge. I will be the moderator of today's lecture. As this is the first East-West lecture, I would like to take a few minutes to say a few words on East-West Bridge. What are its objectives and what it hopes to achieve before we start the lecture. The world today has become more divided than ever since the end of the Cold War due to the escalating geostrategic competition in every domain between the superpowers. It is therefore important for academics, scholars, think tankers, public intellectuals, and opinion leaders from the East and the West, particularly from China and the West, to engage, interact, and learn from each other to foster a better understanding between East and the West, particularly between China and the world, so as to build a more just, fair, and inclusive world. The world needs to understand China better, as much as China must know the rules of the game in engaging with the world. East-West Bridge aims to act as a bridge between the East and the West, in particular between China and the world. It is an open and inclusive international platform to promote civilizational engagement for global peace and prosperity. East-West Bridge will hold regular lectures and dialogues by international scholars to provide balanced, rational, and fact-based commentaries on current affairs, international relations, and issues relating to China and the world. Most of the activities of East-West Bridge will be conducted online, which will be shared in social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and China's Weibo, as well as our website, which is now being developed. East-West Bridge has now close to 40 scholars and advisors from 16 countries, and we encourage East-West Bridge scholars to interact and share their articles, speeches, and interviews in our social media platforms. Today, our advisor, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, will deliver the first East-West lecture. The lecture will take about 30 to 45 minutes, followed by commentaries by two discussants, Professor Dr. Ma Liang from Renmin University of China and Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers from University of Malaya. Dr. Chandra is a well-respected public intellectual and social activist in Malaysia. He is the president of the International Movement for a Just World, or in short, JUST, which is an international NGO based in Malaysia, which seeks to critique global injustice and to develop an alternative vision of a just and compassionate civilization guided by universal spiritual and moral values. Besides being the president of JUST, Dr. Chandra also sits on the board of a number of international NGOs concerned with social justice and civilizational dialogue. He has published extensively on civilizational dialogue, international politics, religions, human rights, and Malaysian society. He is the author and editor of 32 books in English and Malay. Many of his writings have been translated into other languages. Among his latest publications are A World in Crisis, Is There a Cure? And Reflection on Malaysian Unity and Other Challenges. Dr. Chandra founded a multi-ethnic social reform group known as Aliran in 1997 in Malaysia, which he led for 14 years. He is formerly a professor and director of the Center for Civilizational Dialogue, University of Malaya, and a former professor of global studies at University of Science, Malaysia. Dr. Chandra is a regular speaker at seminars and forums at home in Malaysia, as well as at international level. He is the recipient of a number of international awards related to his scholarship and social activism. The title of Dr. Chandra's lecture today is the Just World Possible? The floor is yours now, Dr. Chandra. Dr. Chandra.
Esteemed moderator, Mr. King Key, distinguished discussants, Professor Ma Liang and Associate Professor Roy Anthony Rogers, friends, peace be with you. I'd like to begin by thanking the East-West Center for this very kind invitation. Special thanks to Mr. Cole himself for making this event possible. Friends, there are many visions of a just world. Visions which have been articulated right through the centuries. I have developed my own vision of a just world, which you can glean from my writings, and also from the aspirations and activities of the international movement for a just world. You'll be able to get an idea of the sort of just world that one has in mind. To facilitate our discussion this afternoon, what I'd like to do is to begin by outlining what I see as the 7 major characteristics of the just world. That will be followed by some reflections on the challenges one faces in trying to achieve this vision of a just world, and the way in which we human beings have dealt with these challenges in the past, and the opportunities that lie ahead in trying to achieve our vision of a just world. Friends, the first of these 7 characteristics of a just world. In a just world, no one nation or group of nations would exercise hegemony over the country. That's the first of the attributes of a just world. No one nation or group of nations would exercise hegemony over the country. Hegemony is the antithesis of a just world. What does one mean by hegemony? Hegemony is essentially control and dominance. Hegemony is the tendency to dictate and determine the political, economic, cultural, scientific, and indeed all other major dimensions of life on this planet. It is an attempt to determine these patterns in different spheres of life in accordance with one's own interests, the interests of the hegemon. That's what hegemony is. At this particular juncture in our history, the hegemonic power that we have to contend with is the United States of America. And this has been so for the last few decades. The hegemonic power of the United States of America and its enemies, some of its enemies. That hegemonic power is manifested in all sorts of ways. Because you want to shape the world according to your own desires, you sometimes impose sanctions upon various countries because they're not acting in accordance with your wishes. You punish them. This has happened over and over again. We know what has been happening to Cuba, a small little country, 90 kilometers from the American coast. And we know what has happened to other countries, including Russia, for instance, today. a victim of sanctions, and other countries in between. A small little island and a big nation like Russia, countries like Syria, Iran, countries like Nicaragua, Bolivia, Venezuela, they've all been victims of sanctions at different times and in different ways. Because you want to dominate the world, because you are a hegemon, you also, every now and then, embark upon regime changes. You try to change governments with power that you have. You overthrow existing governments and impose leaders and governments of your choice, even if it's against the interests of the people. And this has happened over and over again. One of the most famous in the early years, meaning by which the early years after the Second World War, was the overthrow of the popular elected Prime Minister of Iran, Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh, in 1953. Because he wanted to nationalize oil in his own country's interest for his people, but because that was against the interests of the big oil companies who were linked to the United States and Britain, the intelligence services of both these countries cooperated, colluded, collaborated in order to overthrow Dr. Mossadegh and replace him with someone who was prepared to play their game. And that someone was the Shah of Iran. That's one example. There are numerous examples, especially in Latin America and other parts of the world. And let me give you just one other example. 20 years after 1953 in Mossadegh, 1973, what happened in Chile? Elected president, popular, wanted to bring about changes in the society, again, wanted to control his own resources. He was targeted, and in the end, he was killed. Dr. Salvador Allende, the president of Chile. And this has gone on. In Southeast Asia, the overthrow of Sukarno in 1965, completed a few years after that. It was also part of that game, regime change. So regime change, sanctions, all sorts of other ways of punishing governments that don't toe the line. That's what hegemonic power means. That was dominance, control, and that's going on now. So that's the first characteristic of things. Of a just world is one where there's no hegemony. Doesn't matter who the hegemon is, there can be no hegemony in a just world. Why? Because hegemony is a denial of the rights of people, their freedoms. Hegemony is a denial of their sovereignty and of their independence. You cannot have these two patterns side by side. Hegemony on the one hand and sovereignty and independence on the other. If you want to develop sovereignty, strengthen independence, the rights of nations, big and small, then you have to bring to an end hegemony. This is clear as that. That brings me to the second feature that I'd like to talk about, of a just world. In a just world, you have individuals, communities, nations exercising their own rights. And at the level of the individual, at the level of the community, means freedom of expression, the right to organize, the right to assemble, the right to mobilize. All those things are very important freedoms. That is part of a just world. In a just world, rights and freedoms would be important. perspective.
Doctor, can I interrupt? You know, it's too, your echo is very strong. Can you adjust your mic? You know, we can't hear you very clearly.
An echo, okay.
The echo is a bit strong. We can't hear you very clearly. Can you adjust a little bit?
Yeah, what can we do? 2 years? How is it now? Okay. Is the echo still strong?
Yes.
Still.
Or can you move I don't know, your mic is closer, you speak closer or what? Yeah, your mic is,
Do you still have the echo?
yeah, now slightly better. Can you move up a little bit the mic?
It's okay. We are not using the mic now.
We're not using the mic?
Now it's better. Now it's better.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, now
Shall
it's
I
better.
continue? Yeah.
Yeah, please continue. Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption, but the second characteristic of a just world is one where the rights of people are respected, their freedom, their independence, the sovereignty of nations, these will be respected in a just world. And they'll be able to exercise these freedoms and rights at the individual level, at the community level, and at the larger global level in a just world. A third characteristic of a just world. In a just world, there will not be mass poverty. There will not be hunger. There will not be starvation. In a just world, you will not have the yawning gap between rich and poor, the very, very rich and the very, very poor. That would not exist in a just world. In a just world, there'll be no concentration of wealth. There'll be equitable redistribution of wealth and resources in a just world. In a just world, the basic needs of everyone would be taken care of. And that's not just needs such as food and shelter and clothing, but also needs such as education, healthcare. They would be available to everyone. And given our situation today, I would argue that even internet and your digital facilities and services would be available to everyone in a just world. In a just world, and this is the fourth characteristic that I would like to highlight here. In a just world, there should not be wars. There will not be wars. Disputes between nations and communities will be resolved through peaceful negotiations. They'll be resolved without resorting to violence. It is a shame that after so many centuries, human beings still go to war, because war is an admission that we have not really become civilized. If we have to resort to wars. And that will not be there in a just world. There'll be no wars. In a just world, the fifth characteristic, different religious and cultural communities will live together in harmony. Differences of this sort will not be a cause for friction in any society. They learn to respect one another. They will not seek to dominate or overwhelm the other religions and cultures. They'll be able to come to an understanding, and what they would emphasize would be their shared values, the values that they have in common among the different religions and cultures. That's what a just world would look like. A sixth characteristic of a just world. In a just world, friends, human beings will not worship wealth, power, and status, which is part of the problem today. It is part of the problem of a highly materialistic society, where the worship of wealth, power, and status determines everything. That will not be so in a just world. In a just world, we would be able to curb corruption, which is linked to that sort of worship that I mentioned a while ago. In a just world, we will not institutionalize greed, which is what we have done in the modern world. We have institutionalized greed, so much so that we do not recognize greed for what it is, because it has become so much a part of society, of the economy, of social relations, of culture, of politics. But we will not institutionalize greed in a just world. And that leads me to the seventh and final characteristic of a just world. In a just world, our values, our ethics would triumph. They would be the foundation of our society. They'll guide human beings everywhere. Virtues will reign supreme in a just society, in a just world. In a just world, we'll have a situation where you will be able to relate to people on the basis of their common humanity, the common humanity that all of us share. In other words, greed would have been tamed and corruption would have been overcome in a just world. Now, these are some ideas about what a just world is like from the perspective of one individual. If you look at our society today, meaning by which societies in different parts of the world, if you look at the world today, there are some societies that have made some attempt to achieve some of these goals in their own way. Some progress here, some progress there. This has happened. Some have succeeded in reducing poverty, for instance. Whatever one may say, one cannot run away from the fact that China is one of the best examples of a country which has reduced absolute poverty, raised 700 million people out of poverty in the last few decades. That's a great achievement. And if you look at some other societies, yes, free speech, right to organize, right to protest, these things have become part of people's way of life. Respect for diversity, for cultures, for religions. There are some societies that have done quite well. But there is no society that has achieved all the goals that we have talked about, all the characteristics. You can't find them in any society at this moment. And it is true that the world as a whole is not just. It is not just. How can it be just when you've got such a huge number of people living in poverty? How can it be just when so much is spent on military technology, much more than we spend on the basic needs of people? It cannot be a just world. So we haven't moved towards a just world. And what is the reason for that? Because there are vested interests right through history. There are vested interests that prevent us from achieving this goal of a just world, of a just society. And these vested interests, you can find them everywhere. In many societies, in different segments of society, in different sectors of society, you have these vested interests. For instance, if you believe in the freedom of expression, in the right of speech, and so on, in order to bring about a just world, in order to stop wars, in order to stop the destruction of life and property, if this is what you believe in, it's not going to be easy. You just have to ask someone called Julian Assange, and he will tell you how difficult it is he has had to pay the ultimate price, in a sense, almost the ultimate price, his life. The suffering he has gone through. Not just in one particular jurisdiction, in different jurisdictions. Why? Because he has challenged the injustices that have been so prevalent. What was happening in Afghanistan, what was happening in Iraq, he challenged them, he revealed the truth, and he had to pay the price. So speaking the truth, telling truth to power, as this famous phrase goes, speaking truth to power, it is not easy. A huge price to pay. That's what I mean by vested interests. Or if you look at yet another aspect of what I talked about, we talked about equitable distribution of wealth and resources and so on. See what happened to Dr. Muhammad Mossadegh when he tried to do that in 1953. He tried to bring about some redistribution in his own society. He was ousted. And in the end, he died as a result of those circumstances. Or what happened, again, the example I just gave you, 1973, Salvador Allende, he was killed because he wanted justice, to take control of resources in his own country, to bring about a more equal and just Chile compared to what it was before. So there is a price to pay if you want to bring about justice in that particular sphere. Or even if you take something else, like you want people to discover their common values, different religions, different cultures. I'll give you one example. The world's largest democracy, for the first few decades of its independence, there was some attempt to show the people that there were certain common values, principles, there was a certain degree of amity and understanding among the different religious and cultural communities. But look at what's been happening in India in the last few years. Hatred, antagonism, sometimes antagonism that expresses itself in killings, in wiping out not just people of your own community, but others, because they stand for shared values, they stand for values which mean a great deal to us, values which ennoble us as human beings, but they have to pay the price. So vested interests are the biggest obstacle to this vision of a just world, anywhere in the world, right through history. But having said that, friends, let's also remember that in spite of vested interests, in spite of all the powerful obstacles that lie before us, human beings have succeeded in achieving some great victories in the struggle for justice, in the struggle for a just society, a just world. What are some examples? Who would have thought that one could abolish slavery? Slavery was very powerful. Whole systems depended upon slavery. They were built around slavery, but slavery was abolished in the end. Today, formal slavery of that sort doesn't exist. You may have other forms of slavery, if you like, but that is something else. But formal slavery of the type that existed for centuries has been abolished. All right? Take another example. If you look at the situation at the peak of colonialism, at the height of colonialism, in all the countries that were colonized in different parts of the world, who would have thought that one could get rid of colonialism? But one got rid of colonialism, formal, structured colonialism. Of course, now we also still have neocolonialism, we know that. But colonialism of that sort, control, direct control over your land, total control over administration, over everything, that sort of colonialism that many of us went through, many countries went through that sort of colonialism that has been brought to an end. And that's a great victory, a great triumph for the human family. So we have done well in some of these respects. And don't forget, the longest struggle for justice, which is part of a just world, the struggle of women for their dignity, for equality. And that has gone on and on for a long, long while, for thousands of years. And look at the situation today. The situation
that most women in many parts of the world encounter is so much better than what it was even 30, 40, 50 years ago. Even societies which are so conservative in relation to gender relations, in relation to the rights of women, they've been forced to accept that women have rights, and they've been forced to make some changes, like what's happened in Saudi Arabia. So the point I'm making, friends, is that it has been possible to struggle for justice. Long, long battles. It takes centuries sometimes, but there are successes that the human race has recorded, and we cannot ignore these successes, which is why, if you look at the present world, the most formidable challenge facing the quest for justice in the world today, in the year 2023, and for the next few decades, would be the struggle against hegemony. That would be the most formidable struggle. But here again, look at the changes that have taken place. Is hegemony what it was 15, 20, 25 years ago? No. There have been changes. Today, we cannot run away from the fact that there are multiple centers of power in the world, and they've emerged, led by China. And there are other centers of power, smaller countries, middling countries, who are exerting themselves. And that, I think, is something very significant. We know that even if you look at the Ukraine war, that is related to hegemony. It is related to certain nations' reaction against US-led hegemony. In the end, it gave birth to a war, which is unfortunate. But the point I'm making is that the struggle today is much more intense, much more organized, much more systematic than ever before. And if you look at one very important aspect of hegemony, which is economics, any analyst will tell you that the US no longer dominates the world's economy. China is powerful as an economic state. And China has a lot of friends all over the world, just as Russia has got a lot of friends all over the world. And these are countries that are on the other side, but the world has changed. They are able to stand up today. They're able to exert their influence because the world has changed. You ask most of the nation states in Africa, they would support China or Russia rather than the United States of America, because they know what they have been through in the past, and they know what the present situation is like. So changes are taking place. There are multiple centers of power. The idea of a multipolar world is not a distant dream. It is a reality. It has already emerged, except that we don't have a welcome ceremony for the multipolar world, but it's there. It's already emerging and it's exerting itself. And one other very important aspect of this change that is taking place, you take something in international relations like the BRI, the Belt Road Initiative, one belt, one road, that initiative, OBOR, one of its short forms, which of course, you know, in Malay, in the Malay language, it means flame, OBOR. And it is a flame that has lighted up the world. The One Belt, One Road initiative offers a hope in terms of changing the dynamics of global economics. We don't know whether it will succeed, but it provides hope without any doubt at all. There are numerous countries that are part of it, and it has sustained itself over the last few years. And that's something that we should welcome. So if you look at the situation, even with hegemony, changes are taking place. In fact, I feel that for our generation, my generation, and more so the generation that will come after us, this would be a struggle. It is a struggle that will end in victory for the multipolar world. There's no doubt about it. We have to ensure that we are faithful to our ideals, that we conduct this struggle with integrity, with compassion, with love, with a very deep sense of justice. And if we do that, then the hope on the horizon will become reality for millions and millions of people in the unborn future that awaits all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra, for delivering an enlightening and thought-provoking speech on whether it is possible to have a just world. Dr. Chandra founded the International Movement for a Just World 30 years ago and dedicated his life in pursuit of a just world. He's no doubt most qualified to speak on the topic of whether we can achieve a just world. In his lecture, Dr. Chandra highlighted that a just world should be one in which political power would be equitably distributed, disparity in wealth would be minimized, countries should coexist in harmony, individuals and communities should respect each other, social justice and human dignity would be the ultimate principles of life. Though in the real world, accomplishing the goals of a just world in totality may never be possible due to geopolitical interest, historical and cultural prejudice. But we must not give up. It is the duty and responsibility of every human being, irrespective of ethnicity, nationality, or religious affinities, to fight for a just world. With that, I would like now to invite Professor Ma Liang from Renmin University of China to share his views on the topic. Professor Ma Liang is a professor at the School of Public Administration and Policy and a research fellow at the National Academy of Development and Strategy at the university. Professor Ma Liang, please.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Kong King Kee for inviting me to attend this meaningful event. I'm currently a member of the East-West Bridge, which is a good hub for us to communicate and exchange with each other. Actually, for the past 3 years, I have no experience to go overseas. So this year, I would like to expand my international travels to meet old and new friends and to continue this kind of cultural exchange. And also, I would like to thank Dr. Chandra Mouzaf's speech, which is quite inspiring, is quite meaningful. You described the 7 key characteristics of a just world, which is quite important and systematical. Actually, before I attended this event, I'm quite interested in the answer. Is it possible? But after your lecture, I do believe that it is possible, and it is possible not only in the future, but also actually in our current generation. Actually, also tell us a lot about what's the meaning of a just world. It's not only meaningful for individual people and the family, but also meaningful collectively for a country and the whole world. And also you mentioned about we should have both breadth and wisdom to create a just world. Because given your description of the historical development and successes, we can say that we really made a great achievement and progresses in make a just world. So it gave us a lot of confidence to continue this journey, to continue this long battle about a just world. To create a just world, I totally agree with you that we should pay attention both domestically and internationally, because we as a human being is going from the law of the jungle to a just world. We have to pay attention to domestically what we can do and internationally what we can do together. I would like to reflect on my reflections of China's experiences in developing a just world or a just nation. Actually, we do it both domestically and internationally. Domestically, we can see that over the past 10 years, China has been doing well in anti-corruption, because corruption usually is the origin of the gap between poor and rich. Actually, it's also the origin of injustice world. So that's why China government is doing a lot to eradicate corruption, to make the government clean and really effective and efficient. Because the government is quite core in helping us to build a just world. That's why we do a lot in anti-corruption. And meanwhile, we are also doing a lot in clean criminal syndicates to make the society a safe place for everyone. And also, as you mentioned, we did a lot in poverty alleviation to really help a lot of families, particularly in the inland provinces, to meet the poverty standard. Actually, if we go back, we can see that lots of them really benefited from these policies. And all of these policies have generated expected outcomes. It is quite relevant and fruitful to reflect on these policies and what China do with this situation. And I do believe that there might be lots of implications from which we can learn. Also, recently, China is doing a lot in building common prosperity, which is actually an updated version of poverty alleviation. Because as long as people earn their income, live far from poverty, they should have more opportunities to develop both culturally. For example, they have to improve their education. They have to know that they have a better future to earn. So these are some of the domestic experiences of China's progress over the past decade. Globally, we can also say that China is doing its best to build a just world. For example, China government initiated the shared future of the human being, which is a very great vision for the world. I do believe that this kind of vision will be beneficial for other countries to follow up and also for the international community to share. And meanwhile, as you mentioned, the Belt and Road Initiative is doing well in helping lots of developing countries to benefit from China's development and to share with the other countries about what we can work together to improve people's livelihood and to improve the social development. Because currently, the whole world is not as just as you expect. But we can see that we are trying to rebalance the rule of the game in the global governance, particularly in the field of finance, trading, taxation, climate change, and so on and so forth. By engaging in this rule of the game to make the global governance to be better catering to developing countries, I think we can narrow the gap between the South and the North, and finally to have a better, just world. Meanwhile, we can say that if we reflecting on China's experiences, we have to highlight the role of the government, both central and local governments, in helping us to develop a just world. Because if we look at the roles, the functions that the government can do with a just world, we can say that they can do it both in the distributive function and the redistributive function. And meanwhile, it should be very strong in regulatory functions to make sure that the market is competing in a fair play, to make sure that people can communicate, can compete in a fair game. So this kind of arrangement is core to a just world. Also, I agree with you that apart from the government, we should pay attention to other forces, particularly the societal actors that we can pursue. And also, we can say that in a digital era, it's quite important to highlight the role of digital technologies in a just world. On the one hand, we can say that big data analytics, AI technologies, they are actually enlarging the current gap between the poor and the rich. But on the other hand, it has great potential to address digital divide and also to make sure that we can narrow the Mason effect so that a just world would be possible in near far. So I believe that China and other countries can contribute to this kinds of movement by using pilots and demonstrations and best practices so that to show we can do in the right direction and by concrete actions. So I really appreciate your speech, and I really look forward to follow up discussions with you and also to have a better communication with the other members in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ma. Thank you for sharing with us China's experience in trying to achieve a more just world. I wouldn't say it is totally just, but I think it is trying very hard. You know, I think this is what we say, the special characteristics of socialism in China. Dr. Chandra is right in saying that corruption is the main cause for this injustice. And also top on the list of the UN Sustainable Development Goal 2030 is the eradication of poverty. And China has, for the first time in the history of mankind, elevated 800 million people out of abject poverty, which is really an achievement. You know, China used to be very poor, but it resort to the so-called whole of the nation approach, you know, to reduce poverty. And elimination of poverty is a prerequisite for common prosperity. Common prosperity is the ultimate aim, or the founding aspiration of the Communist Party of China. Development must benefit all. It must not enrich just a handful. Deng Xiaoping said that. And I believe, you know, the core of Xi Jinping's talk is justice and fairness. So he wants to build a fair and just, a more moderately prosperous society in China, and eventually, of course, you know, a developed country. And internationally, he promotes this idea of a community with shared future, which emphasizes that no civilization is more superior than others. All the countries must treat each other, with respect. We learn from each other, and you know, and you promote harmony in diversity. You know, we may have different views, but then we try to, you know, we can keep our difference, but then we share, you know, similarities. So I think these are all the examples, you know, efforts that China can share with the world. And thank you, Professor Ma, for sharing with us. So our next discussion is Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers from University of Malaya. Dr. Roy is the Deputy Dean of Europe Asia Institute of University of Malaya. Dr. Roy, please.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank the East-West Bridge, in particular Mr. Koh, for the effort to organize this inaugural lecture. And of course, indeed, it's an honor to be the discussant for this inaugural speech or inaugural lecture by none other than Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. It's always wonderful to listen to your lecture. Thank you very much. And also to Professor Ma Liang, to be a fellow discussant. I have just a few points. Firstly, I do appreciate very much what Professor Chandra or Dr. Chandra had mentioned about just world, and he has rightfully highlighted the 7 dimensions of a just world. And what strikes me a lot is that I think we need to have hope. We cannot just straight away brush it aside that just world is an idealistic concept. I think the greatest tragedy can ever happen to mankind is not just war by itself, but is when we lose hope, because it is by having hope that brings progress. If we lose hope, that's the end. Because mankind have gone through various tragedies throughout history. There were wars, there were famine, and so on and so forth. And recently in Turkey, you had the earthquake. But as long as we have hope, right, it starts with a dream, and when we have hope, and this hope persists and goes on and continue to burn, there is always a possibility of a change. And Dr. Chandra have highlighted how change is possible. We cannot say that these are two idealistic concepts, right? And I believe, for example, opportunity of education. Gone were the time where education was only for the elites or those from certain families. Today, education is possible, at least even in the case of Malaysia or China. And issue on gender. At one time, female were not given the opportunity to even go near to schools or for education, but today that is possible in many countries which once upon a time held on to very conservative concepts. So we must live up to the hope. That is very important. And what was highlighted by Dr. Chandra and also my colleague, Professor Ma Liang, about China's experience. And there's no doubt about it. Once upon a time, forgive me, China was considered one of the developing countries, was once, unfortunately, was even called as the sick man of Asia, but today I would say it's the strong man of Asia. So again, hope make it a reality. If we lose hope, that is the end. And coincidentally, I'm not trying to just promote this book. I have no commercial interest in that. But if you have the opportunity, try and get a copy of this book, How China is Governed. And it's written by many of them are non-Chinese scholars writing about those issues that were highlighted by Professor Dr. Chandra Muzaffar and Professor Ma Liang, how China has progressed within a period of 40 years. And that gives us, again, hope. So that I wish that this more people can read. As I said, it is written by most of it are non-Chinese scholars from either from Southeast Asia or from Europe and from the Middle East. And very important is about, when we talk about a just world, it goes back to for me personally, it goes back to what is called the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule, which is found in, I would say, most of the sacred scriptures. That is, do unto others how you want others to do unto you. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar spoke about slavery, anti-slavery. If we don't want we to be enslaved, and first and foremost, we must not enslave others. I can't change others, but at least I can change myself. So I think the first step towards a just world, and as Dr. Ma Liang mentioned, it's not in near future, it should be happening today in our generation, is how do I treat others? How, if I want a just world to be a reality within my own community, how do I treat others? And this golden rule is contained in the sacred scriptures of the Abrahamic religions, as in Islam, in Judaism, in Christianity, in the writings in the Confucius writing, in the Analects, is in Taoism, in the Tao Te Ching, is also in Hinduism, in the Mahabharata, is also contained in Buddhism. But of course, it's phrased in a different way, but the essence is the same. So when we talk about the just world, I think when Dr. Chandra was talking about the just world, the 7 points or 7 dimensions, this idea of a golden rule comes in, that how do we treat others? That is the first step towards a just world. I think I will stop here because some other points that I wanted to mention has been highlighted by my colleague, also Dr. Ma Liang. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Roy, for giving us hope. as you said, human being must have hope. Dr. Chandra emphasized that, you emphasized that. And we share the same future. Okay, we are inhabitants of this planet Earth, which is now facing a lot of issues, a lot of problems, climate change and all this. Yes, I think if we work together, we can inch in, maybe we can't achieve it in totality, as I said just now, but I think step by step, we can build a better world. It may not be a just world, but a better world. There are a lot of, to build a better world, we need to engage, we need to interact, in this world, there are different civilizations. This is the reason why, I set up this East-West bridge to act, as a bridge to interact, to engage. This is our first lecture. There are still many other lectures to come. I think we look forward to that, and we invite more international scholars and our East-West scholars to speak at this platform, either through in a form of lecture or dialogue. And finally, I'd like to thank Dr. Chandra Musawa, Professor Maliang, Dr. Roy, for taking time and share with you your views on how to build a just world, whether it is possible. So with that, I thank everybody, the participants, and all the backroom boys who have made this lecture a success, and wish you in future. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
the best. Stay
Bye.
safe.
All the best.